All right, status right now. And so we're encouraging everybody to wear masks. You don't have to, it's not required. In order for it to be required, we have to get the health department to tell us that we're allowed to do that. So we do encourage you to wear a mask. You don't have to. If you'd like to talk and remove your mask, you're welcome to do that, as I'm doing. But I just wanted to let everybody know that that's the, and we've had a couple of meetings in the past that we had some tech problems, and then last meeting we had COVID problems, and so we decided from here on out, we're going to meet in person. If it's high, we're going to request masks, not mandatory. We're going to request that. Once it's medium and low, they'll just be encouraged. You can decide for yourself. So at this point, it's high, and I'm going to go ahead and call the July 12th Moab City Council meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. And we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to ask Teresa King to lead us in the pledge. Under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Teresa. And first item of business is citizens to be heard, and we have one person in the audience today that would like to speak. If anybody else would like to speak, please fill out the forms and put it in this box right here, and I'll call you up. Joseph Lima, who wants to talk to us about a sound pressure study.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the meeting last week. Appreciate all that everybody did with the Scots on the Rocks and kind of getting that happening. But I do understand everybody's concerns. I've kind of rewatched the meeting and listened to what everybody's kind of been concerned about with sound and different volumes and stuff. So with my knowledge, being a sound engineer and owning a cable manufacturing company that I manufacture cables for musicians, I understand so much about sound. And, I've got 40 years of being a working, performing musician, been singing on stages in Moab since I was 10 years old. So I'm putting together a sound pressure study. I'm attending all of the musical events that we're having here throughout the rest of this year, taking different readings from different points of sitting in front of speakers, being on the sides of the stage, behind the stage, being in somebody's front yard on the curb, so that we have a better knowledge of what we're up against. I think it's really important for all of you to be able to make better decisions on these events once we actually have some data to back it. I've done a couple of tests thus far, everything from like the community movie night is a good one just to kind of get a feel for it. I've taken some sound readings and decibel readings from there, as well as the community concert that we just had on Friday. So I'm putting together that data. Even going to the concert on Friday at Swanee Park, the opening act had they had volumes of 80 to 85 decibels. Not constant, which is an interesting thing because musical instruments are dynamic, so they go up and down in volume, so it's not a constant sound that we're hearing, but it is out in the open. So, and then the main act that came on, the folks from Portland, we had a couple of 99 decibel peaks, but 80%, 85% of the time we were sitting at in between 85 and about 88 decibels, which is manageable according to OSHA and all this stuff. So I hope to come back to you guys here in several months once we've put together all that data from the folk festivals, Scots on the Rocks. I will be out and about the whole parameter. I'll reach out to a couple of people that I know in the neighborhood. Hopefully I can get with Donnie Kiffmeyer and Khaki and sit in front of their house because I know them personally. And let's try to figure out what we're looking at. I think it would be better for us to have some good readings to look at so that when these issues come back up again, whether it is Scots on the Rocks or the Folk Festival, Music Festival, we know what we're looking at. Kind of makes sense. So I'm offering my time just because I want everybody to be educated and all of us to, be able to make good choices on this instead of, I've kind of read everything that's, like things we're talking about today and such. And I think once we have some numbers, I think it will make it easier for you guys. So I look forward to seeing you guys this fall and presenting that information to you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Joseph. Really appreciate that and look forward to the results and imagine that you'll work with Annie and Carly to get us that information. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll move right on to presentations with the Moab Museum.
Good afternoon, good evening, and thank you for allowing the museum to tell you a little bit about what's been happening over the last several years. My name is Forrest Rogers. I'm the director of the museum, and I want to begin by introducing you to the brain trust of the museum, sitting behind me. Mary Langworthy, over my right shoulder, is our interpretive and public programs manager, has been responsible for school programs and developing a lot of the membership outreach activities. Delighted to have her here. She is a YGP alum, and I think anybody looking for employees ought to start looking at alumni of YGP because they have some remarkable young people. Also with me is Tara Barish, who is our curatorial and collections manager. Some of you may know Tara from her stint at Back of Beyond Books. Tara rejoined the museum 3 years ago as our curatorial and collections manager after receiving her master's degree in archaeology from the University of New Mexico and is a registered professional archaeologist. We're delighted that she's here with us. I also want to begin by thanking Tawny for her service as an ex officio member of our board, and Summer for her help in allowing me to get to this point and sharing with you some stories about the museum. Included in the agenda was some textual background to how we got to where we are, and I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to share with you some of the images of the museum, which I think is the best way to explain what we've done, what we're trying to do, and what we hope to accomplish in the future. I don't have the magic touch yet. I didn't push it hard enough. There you go.
Can you speak
Thanks.
louder or closer to the microphone? You're not being picked up on the Zoom. Thank you.
Is this better?
You're clear in here, but
Okay.
it's not on Zoom.
Okay. In 2023, the museum will celebrate its 65th year and the 35th year of the O'Lory building, the Dan O'Lory building, which was funded through the generosity of Dan O'Lory and several other locals. In 2015, the museum announced plans to raise $50 million to build a natural history museum on the banks of the Colorado River. And the response to that announcement was exactly what you would have imagined. A town of 5,000 to 6,000 people and a museum of that size and scale would be hard to raise money for, much less sustain over time. The museum asked the community what it wanted, and the community said, we want you to stay downtown. We want you to focus on the stories of our region. We want you to up the game and be a little bit more professional and try to do a better job of engaging in the community. So in 2017, some early work was done and the transformation process began in 2018. The image, if you can see it on the left, is my introduction to the museum when I came to town. I told my wife that the only thing missing was some bullet holes in the museum sign. During this process, we engaged an exhibit designer, a professional exhibit design consultant who had worked on the Natural History Museum in Salt Lake City, and so knows the region quite well. And she's helped guide our branding and our storytelling throughout. So this was the first step. We wanted to rethink ourselves. And this is a process of moving from being an attraction where the exhibits are relatively static, where the text looks like people have taken the writing out of a history book and just placed it on the wall next to an image or an object, without really helping people understand what the stories are. So we decided that we're a small museum, but there are big stories to be told in Moab, in Grand County, in the southeastern Utah corner of the Colorado Plateau. So we began our work and decided to renovate the building. You may recall, those of you who have been there, it was small with a central staircase and a mezzanine, a lot of lost space. So we designed a new space, opening up the museum walls, extending the South Gallery so that there was more room available. And we used a design that was focused on durability and flexibility. Durability important because this is an expensive process and we wanted to do it right and make sure that we work to build things for the long term. And flexibility because we wanted to be able to change the museum experience over as frequently as our staff resources allowed. One of the most important things for museums is to care for the objects in its collection, and that's particularly important for a regional or local history museum, that it benefits from the generosity of people from the community who are sharing their family heirlooms, their remembrances, their documents, and the memories they have of their community. We recognized that the first thing we needed to do was professionalize the care of collections, and so we will inflict a couple of before and after images for you to demonstrate what it takes from just putting objects on shelves to taking care of them in ways that meet federal standards and professional standards for object care. And you can see there's a greater deal of organization. It's very time-consuming. Many of the objects are actually sitting in mounts that have been made by staff and volunteers. This, I think, is one of the most important ways we serve our community and the people who have supported the museum for a long time. We've also focused on caring for the objects in our collection in a much more organized fashion and in a way that allows us to identify where objects are when people come and say, my grandparents gave you an X and we'd like to see it. Or my great aunt gave the museum a mug and we have a picture of it. Can you find that? And for a long time, it was very difficult for staff to do that, primarily because the museum was underfunded and understaffed. And it takes a lot of detail work to do the kind of work that takes us from before to after. I do not have that gene, but fortunately we have Tara, who is able to get us from before to after. Another thing that we felt was really important to elevate our standards was to take care of the objects that have been in our collection and under our care. So these two images are slightly different. I hope you all remember the Urbanic map, John Urbanic's love letter to Moab. That sat in a frame, uncovered in the museum for 15 years. And we felt it was really important for however it gets exhibited in the future to have a thorough cleaning. So what you see in that image on the right are the gloved hands of a professional conservator with whom we've hired for several conservation projects. And this is an image of her vacuuming one of the 20 sections of the Urbanic map. On the left-hand side is a specialized platform on which we are exhibiting the ancestral load basket. And that's important because of the danger to the object if it has contact with certain materials, certain surfaces. So we spent an extraordinary amount of money to build that display specifically for the object or other objects like it that we may borrow from other institutions. And then we also paid to have it conserved by the same conservator. These are parts of the running of a museum that a lot of people don't see. And the reality is most of the expense of a museum is overhead. It's storage, it's caring for objects in this way, many of which the public doesn't see very often. Another major change that we have introduced is how we relate to the native peoples of this region. And on the left, the before is an example of the displays that the museum used to present to the public. In many cases, objects are presented in ways that are nowhere near museum standards. Several of those baskets have been glued, or the pots have been glued to the wood that they sit on. There's just a lot of cultural lack of awareness and attention in the way the exhibits were put together. And so our commitment when we exhibit objects that are native objects, and we may or may not know the specific cultural community from which they come, that we will not exhibit them without talking with the closest descendants of the community from which they come. And so on the right, you see a water vessel that, with a description of the process we used. It was a year-long discussion in tribal consultations to be able to present this water vessel in a way that is culturally appropriate. And so our motto, as specifically it relates to native objects, is nothing about us without us. That is to say, we provide a venue, we provide a place for the voices of the native peoples to tell their stories with our help. Another thing that we decided is that the before museum was, as I said earlier, almost a series of images that could have been clipped out of a history book and then put next to objects with a lot of text. And many of the people that we talked to said that there is a lot of stuff to see here, but I don't know what the story is. I don't have anything, there's nothing that pulls me through. And so we committed to using a much more contemporary design style that emphasizes individual objects and uses those objects to reflect the many stories that could be told. It's a much more open space, it's brighter. I take as a compliment the fact that when somebody looked in and saw the iPads and the design said, well, this looks like an Apple store. And some people who miss the old museum may not get the same sensation that we did. But we feel that we've created a much more welcoming, open space that really showcases the objects in our care. We also took a different approach, and that is rather than having a lot of what the museum professionals call stuff, is to really focus on individual objects and create ways to use the technology to present a lot of the information from our historic photograph collection. And that's why we have the iPads there. Each one is loaded with 12 to 18 images, often mixing historic with contemporary images to help tell the story. And it's a much different and much more relaxed way where the visitors are not overwhelmed with all the things that they're looking at. This is our beauty picture. This is an image that was taken by our exhibit designer to demonstrate that what we've done is within those limited resources that we had, we've done everything we could to display these objects at the highest standards of the museum world. And we're as close, I think, as we can get with the current resource limitations that we have. And I think it's important for the community to know that in large part because of the new exhibit, and in large part because of the work that Tara and Mary have done, our profile and our reputation and our credibility with state agencies in the humanities, arts and museums, and the archives has grown significantly. And that's important to us as a regional museum. It's important to us because that provides funding that allows us to do some of the things we couldn't otherwise do. We've also made a commitment to being much more involved in the community, and we've had partnerships with YGP, with CFI, with the Multicultural Center, with the charter school, and we've tried to open the museum up in many ways to broader sections of the community. And this is an image of Katsina, from the Katsina exhibit that we had in the fall and early winter. This was a remarkable, vivid exhibit where we also had for 3 months, for one weekend each 3 months, we had one of the Hopi carvers demonstrate their process. And it was a great opportunity for people to see objects that in many cases they only think of as a tourist piece, as something that they would buy in a store, and get to appreciate the symbolism and the sacredness of Katsinas. We also have made an effort to really partner with our communities in Moab and the not-for-profits especially. And you can see there are 2 examples, a group from YGP with Mary, and then on the right, an exhibit that we co-created with Seek Haven to celebrate Domestic Violence Month. This is our way of helping tell local stories in ways that people may not expect a museum to do. And our view is that the museum has to be telling stories not just about the region's past, but connecting those to the present and prompting people to think about our future as well. We're not just a stuffy building with stuffy people. And then just to bring it to a close, some exciting things that we have coming up. This is the first year where we've been able to look ahead and develop a 2-year exhibit plan with programs and the like. So here are just some examples of things. The 42nd Annual Ice Cream Social will be held on the afternoon or early evening of July 24. We've got some exciting stories that are coming up. And one of the commitments we've made is to community history and helping locals in the community tell their stories. And hence we've got several workshops, one on recording stories to help people learn how to do their own family histories or oral histories using a listening station, and caring for keepsakes, which I think is the right title, Tara. Which is, how do you take care of those family heirlooms, the photographs, the negative slides, the documents that your family has that you want to keep to pass on to kids, grandkids, and the like. So we're really trying to make this a community-oriented museum, turning it inside out in many ways. And our future is going to be finding ways to tell all of the big stories we have beyond the walls of the museum. How do we find new channels by which to deliver the stories virtually, digitally, video, etc.? And that's the direction we're going. We've been very fortunate to have the support of the county. About 40% of our revenue comes from is tourist-driven money, including the TRT and then visitor spending. About 30% from our endowment, and the balance is coming from gifts and grants, restricted grants, unrestricted grants, and donations. So we're positioned for the future. We have a lot of exciting things ahead of us. We really want everybody in Moab to believe that we tell the local story better than anyone else. I think that's about the greatest compliment we can get. I believe I've completed my time. I've certainly run out of slides for you, and willing to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you for that. That's very, love the museum, always have. We're very fortunate to have such a high-quality museum, and with your work, turning it into what it is now is just fantastic. So thank you so much, and thank you, Donnie, for representing us on your board.
Tanya has been a great addition to our board, and she brings many things to us, but she also has a really clear sense of the community.
Yep.
And keeps us on the straight and narrow.
Great.
Most of the time.
Thank you.
So thank you. Do you trust me? You're more trusting than I. Thanks so much, Summer.
Great. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated for all the work that you do. Okay, we've got a couple of department head updates. First, we've got Obi to give us an update on the wastewater treatment plant and some of the cool things that are happening out there. I don't know if they're going to be as cool as the museum, but some of them's pretty good.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. I have a slideshow, but it doesn't really, it's kind of just what I'm going to say anyway, so I don't know if you guys want to see it.
You put the work into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to see it.
Doesn't seem like it.
Go to your, exit out of that, and then just go here, File Explorer here. Let it think. Is this it? Nope, doesn't like that. We'll get it. This one. Hold tight. Just thinking.
Anybody have a joke?
So while we're waiting, Obi, how's it going out there?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
There's some maintenance issues, which I'll go over. I guess I can give you a brief overview of what we're going to talk about. I'll talk about flows from last year, which will be...
You want to hit your present mode and we'll see if this is going to work?
There it is. Just to remind you guys of some cold weather.
Say, what's that white
That's
stuff?
good.
So we're going to talk about kind of the flow update, mostly from last year, some maintenance issues we've seen, and then kind of the discussions we've had around putting the effluent into the Matheson wetlands. So flows. So these are slides I pulled out of a different presentation from last year, but if you look at this blue line here, that is last year, and it's like a historically high flow year, which I think every metric has shown that, right? This year kind of mirrors that, but down just a couple %. So we're still pretty high this year. But kind of mirroring this, we're dropping big time, right? This month has been down quite a bit. The average flow for, so the 7 highest records, like each monthly record, the 7 highest 7 months from last year were the highest on record. I don't know if that made any sense at all. And 4 of them were the highest all time. That being said, our capacity is still plenty good. That red line shows, really, if you look at the percentages at the bottom here, this is our percent of capacity for hydraulically, and the blue line is our percent of capacity by pounds of BOD, like kind of the thickness of it, how much we can treat outside of hydraulics. And if you look, we're not over 70% really in any of those categories. So we're plenty good for, 8 or 10 years for sure. On to the maintenance issues. If I'm going too fast or you guys have questions, just jump in. Yeah.
It looked like the BOD and hydraulic capacity were often very close, but sometimes one would be higher than the other.
Yeah.
Why would the ratio of the BOD to the fluid vary so much?
Just so the majority of the fluid coming in is going to be like just water, right? Showers, that sort of thing. And at certain times of year, it seems like it comes in thicker, for lack of a better word. And I'm not exactly sure why that is, but it's just going to be more, just more organic strength. So in the spring, it seemed like we get it, and in the fall, that could be like cleaning of restaurants. Like we'll get a lot of BOD out of them, that sort of thing. But those are just guesses. I'm not really sure.
Thanks.
So last year, really last year and a half, we've had a blower meltdown. We have 5 compressors, 5 blowers that put air into the SBRs. 4 of them have failed in the last, it took about a year. It's very long to replace them, as you can see, about 100 days. We had one on hand at one point, that only took 14 days, so that was really nice. There's one still out right now. Very expensive, it's about $100,000 in repairs on all of those blowers. We think, so 4 of the 5 blowers had like a cooling fan that was wired backwards, and where you think that was what caused the failures. Right now, they're wired the right way, and we're not getting high temperature alarms like we had been for the first 3 years. So the first 3 years, like while I've been there, and while Greg before me, all summer we would just get high temperature alarms and we couldn't figure out what the problem was. And so at this point, we're putting vibration sensors in, which should give us an early warning to when they're failing. But if we continue to have problems, we may need to put in oil coolers, which could cost more money. But we're hoping that really it was just the fans and they've all failed. And so they've been replaced, and now hopefully the new ones don't fail. So any questions on that?
Was there any possibility or attempt to recover the cost? It sounds like an installation defect.
Well, I mean, the blower company has worked with us as far as pricing, but we haven't we haven't tried to like go back and sue them or anything like that, no. But they have heavily discounted the blowers that we got. So we have been battling filamentous bacteria. You've probably heard me say it before. On the right there, you can see the little spaghetti pieces. So like this guy, let me see if you can see that. That's what it should look like. Real dense flock. That's the good stuff right there. Bacteria, it'll settle to the bottom. This is a different form of bacteria that forms these long, stringy filaments, and so that it doesn't settle well, and we have to go in, we treat it with chlorine, which is kind of like chemotherapy, right? Like it affects this more than it affects the good bacteria, but it affects the good bacteria as well. We've had to do that 2 or 3 times a year for the past couple of years. It's fairly expensive. One of the contributing factors we think is oil and grease, most likely from restaurants, which leads us to the other one. The next one, grease traps. We've been hitting grease traps pretty heavily this year. So Moab has 80 so FSEs, or food service establishments. That can be restaurants, but also hotels and gas stations and anybody that creates grease. There's 15 without a grease trap at all. We have 11 that have a grease trap, but we don't really have a way of testing them. This year we've done 38 tests, 18 fails, about half have failed, which is a pretty high rate. We find 4 of them, so we generally test them twice before we find them. So in the coming months, there'll probably be a lot more fines. This is something I'd like to circle around to. I'd like to make everybody have a grease trap, make them all testable. There's also the possibility, talking with some other communities, of tiering the fines. So possibly raising our lowest level of our lowest limit for grease, but then tiering it the more grease they're putting into the system, the higher the fine is, instead of just, right now, if you're barely failing or if you're failing horribly, it's the same thing. So it'd be nice to tier that so that it's, because some people are trying really hard and almost passing, and there's people that aren't trying at all and just failing, and it's the same outcome. Moving on. In the wetlands. I think this has been talked about for a very long time, but about 6 months ago, the Nature Conservancy approached us about taking water from the sewage treatment plant and putting it in the wetlands, both for just to maintain a volume in the wetlands and also for some of the fish stuff they're doing down there. At first we were pretty open to it. Then they approached the DWQ who writes our permit. And the DWQ, the water quality, got back to us with what the requirements would be, and it just looks like it's going to be very expensive. So we got it back. We sent it to Bowen Collins, our engineering firm, and they took a look at it to see how much it would cost, because we didn't really think we were going to eat that cost, as for the wetlands to eat the cost of additional treatment. And their finding was basically that we need to do more testing, and the testing we need to do is going to be very expensive. And so we have a meeting with them in a couple weeks, and then we're going to talk about the future as far as that goes. I mean, there's some alternatives of possibly us just discharging to the river and then pumping from the river back into the wetlands, which might be able to be done cheaper than what we're going to have to do. I think some of it is probably like the low ammonia. We could probably do that. We might need, that'll be more expensive as far as blowers. We may have to add a blower, but pretty possible. It's the metals that are the most concerning. Apparently most wastewater treatment plants don't treat for metals. That's more of a water process. So if a treatment plant is discharging metals, usually you try to get it on a pre-treatment, like you try to get whoever's discharging that into your system. So trying to get it out on the back end of the plant would be very expensive. Like I said, like a water treatment, we would need like water filtration type systems. Any questions?
Questions for Obi?
Just going back to the grease trap, so I just noticed that you said, some folks are trying really hard but still having a hard time making it, without getting too technical, is there an easy way to explain in a nutshell what makes it hard to meet the standard?
I mean, they may have a grease trap that's too small.
Okay.
Or they may have staff that doesn't do a good job of, so, I mean, a grease trap's like it's like a last resort, right? So the less you put in the system, the less the trap has to trap. So if you have a dishwasher that's just washing everything down the drain, that's going to be much harder to pass than if they're scraping it, scraping plates aggressively into the trash.
Okay, thanks.
So, yeah.
That helps. Give me this idea.
Yeah.
Caleb?
So I'm on various newsletters about, which includes grant opportunities, and it seems like wetland restoration grants are pop up periodically. So does your department have the capacity, or does Bowen Collins have the capacity to sort of look at grant opportunities to fund this?
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely, we could be as aggressive or as, not aggressive as you guys want, right? There'll definitely be a lot of expense, like both upfront and ongoing. For the metal part, they said if we had to go to a full water treatment system, that would be, $1 million or more in upgrades. But if that's something that you guys wanted to pursue, then that's something we could pursue.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Chuck and I met with Linda at the Nature Conservancy a few weeks ago, and we talked about this and, talked about the Nature Conservancy kind of kicking in some money for some of the treatment, and also the fact that we need to get that line changed that goes from the treatment plant to the river. And so, anyway, we're still in conversation with them. to see
Yeah, I
if
mean,
there's-
from my perspective, they should cover all of the cost of it.
Right,
I mean,
Yeah.
it's, the ratepayers of Moab shouldn't have to pay for that.
right, I agree. And, so we're, they wanted to keep me, I guess, make sure that we were still interested in that process, and I'm assuming that the council still is.
Yes.
And so, I think we'll still work with them and move forward to the point where we get to the money, and then we'll need to talk some more. Right? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, the only thing hi, Opie. The only thing I might add, and Opie and I have talked about this before too, is that if you'll recall in the sewer bond project, the outfall is one of our funded projects. Whatever we do with treated effluent has to be tied to that outfall.
Right.
And we explained that to TNC when we met with them the other week. And what we've proposed to do, and we told Linda this, is that this fall, I really think it screams for an alternatives analysis to really figure out what the best way to do it is, which is tied to the testing. So maybe we'll talk about that when we meet with them in 2 weeks or whenever it is.
Yeah, like 2
That'd
weeks.
be great. Good. Anything else for Obi? Thanks, Obi. It was very interesting.
Thanks.
It was a little different than the museum, but it was still very worthwhile for us to know what's going on out there. Thanks for everything you do. Very much appreciated. Okay, next we have Chuck to give us a couple of updates on the transportation plan, the roundabout, the diverse parking, hotspot funding that Chuck's been working on. Okay. Sorry.
Hey. Good evening. Does anybody recognize that as Alfred Hitchcock?
I didn't want to say anything, 'cause it tells you how old I am.
Well, you must have seen it on the reruns, that's all I'm thinking.
Don't count on it.
What I thought we could talk about tonight is, and we can talk about anything you want to talk about too in our department, but we have multiple projects that are cost share funding. The way that the system's set up in Utah is the gas tax dollars that we pay at the pump go to Washington. Washington keeps a bunch. Utah keeps a bunch. It doesn't distribute a lot down to the cities and towns for our road transportation and our Class C roads compared to other states. I'm not complaining, it's just the reality of it. But there's a lot of programs that UDOT has and the feds have that require cost share, and we've entered into multiple ones of those programs. So I thought, given the increasing costs over the last year that we've all seen throughout our lives, that it would be good to talk about some of these tonight. So from a hotspot funding, remember that everyone knows that's the legislative dedicated funds. The Moab area transit, our status is we're currently advertising a request for proposals. UDOT is, our luck, UDOT's rebuilding its transit group as we're coming online, so there's some learning that's going on at the UDOT level, though they've been quite good to work with. And they had approved our RFP because a key to our transit shuttle pilot program, the 5-year program, is there are federal dollars in there, about a third of it. Well, federal dollars have really stringent bookkeeping requirements on it, and they want to make sure that everything from our solicitation to our contracts to our payments meet the federal standard. So after the group approved the RFP, then they asked their attorneys to review it. So their attorneys are reviewing it now. So we just, on Friday, we issued a 3-week extension for the proposal submittals until August 4th, because their attorneys still hadn't reviewed it. And we don't know if they're gonna make us re-advertise or not. We're just waiting, even though we had already. So I'm not really raising any red flags, except that the timing is stretching out due to the federal process, and I can say that in all honesty. We've And I will say, we had a mandatory pre-proposal meeting, and we have, I think, 3 to 4 firms who are potentially qualified who are interested. So I think that's a good thing. Hotspot funding also, Emma Boulevard / Mini Lee. It'll be Mini Lee as you come off the highway, and then it'll go back to being Emma. That was a condition of the land exchange back 3 years ago. So that's why the name. We're reviewing, I expect tomorrow to have the 100% draft plans from our consultant. We moved ahead. Remember last time we were at council, we showed you some 60% plans, and generally speaking, you said, okay, go do it. And well, so we have been, and they haven't changed appreciably, except we're fine tuning them to construction level plans, sorry. And we'll pick up about 51 stalls there. Our probable advertising is July 28th, which is coming up pretty quick, but we'd like to try and get that started this year. We think there's a good chance we can get that done. And that includes a city commitment of $400,000, which is, I confirmed with Ben, budgeted for in this year's budget. If you'll recall, UDOT wasn't going to pay for the new part of the road, but they'll pay for the parking spaces element. That's why the city has to kick in that amount of money. Downtown dispersed parking. After we met with council probably 6 weeks ago, we had our another public meeting, community meeting. Generally speaking, we had good responses, positive responses, I guess I would say. But we are trying to incorporate some modifications to do what we can to make the parking plan acceptable. Right now, we're working on draft final 30% plans and cost estimates. And we're planning to come back to council in early August for your, I said approval / comments, the 30% to approve. I don't know that we'll have it on for action, but we'll want you to have an opportunity to look at the plans and comment on them, and plus we can discuss cost estimates and things like that. And then what we do, of course, is move on to construction level plans, which potentially we will have completed in, I think, late fall. And right now, one of the key things that we're talking about as a team, a design team is, and we've included Levi, and we'll come back to council, keep council informed, and get your input, obviously. But construction phasing plan, because that's going to be a disturbance of the streets. And at this point, we're thinking likely we'll do 2 to 3 streets at a time. There's 10 streets altogether, and we obviously wouldn't do 10 streets all at once. But we think there's maybe a way where we could do 2 to 3, and we'll be looking at traffic control plans, trying to work with businesses. We'll talk to them and get delivery schedules and things like that, and try and make sure that the impacts are minimal. But there will be impacts, and I think we all knew that. But we're taking that pretty seriously. And at this point, we're thinking, and we just FYI, that we're going to go out for one bid for all the streets, even though it's probably going to be a 2-year contract. We think we might get a volume discount, so to speak. Plus, we're managing one contractor. They'll learn in the first 2 streets, so that we have that experience as we do streets 3 through 10. So moving forward on that. The Unified Transportation Master Plan. We are going to have the final report to council at your next meeting on July 26th. After we met last time with you and gave you an overview, we went out to the public, got comments back, positive, generally speaking. One of the things that's up, now I'm going to take a little longer on this. One of the things that's happened is there is a program out, and Luke, you had sent, thanks for sending that link, but we've also heard about it from a few other places. There's what's called a Safe Streets and Roads for All, or if you like the acronym, the SS4A, which is commonly known as. And it's part of the bipartisan infrastructure law money that was passed last year at the national level. So these are federal dollars, once again, coming down through. And it has a focus on multimodal and safety, as well as equality, I guess I would say. So as we've talked to our consultant, and we literally became aware of this in detail on Monday, we believe that if we add a Vision Zero goal, which is not in there now, the Vision Zero goal is essentially to say that City Council wants to try and achieve zero level of accidents on our roads and maximize safety. I mean, it was a program that was started in Sweden in the 1990s, and it's been effective at doing that. And so if we add that Vision Zero goal to our transportation plan, we don't know yet because this is a rapidly developing thing, that will qualify as an action plan. And if that's an action plan, then that allows us to apply for implementation plan, which is construction money. And it's an 80-20 cost share. You know, there are very, very few 100% grant programs out there for transportation construction programs. It's just, so there's an 80-20 cost share, with 80 being the feds, 20 being local government. So if any of you are thinking that adding that Vision Zero goal is a bad thing, it'd be nice to know now, and I know you haven't seen it, I could pull up the website and we could look at it. Otherwise, we're going to add it into it, and then you could pare it out if you don't like it next week, and then we wouldn't be eligible to use our transportation master plan. Actually, I think it's very serendipitous potentially, because there are projects, as you know, in the master plan that are safety-driven projects and are multimodal projects. And right now, the one that I think is the leading candidate, and we can potentially make a joint application with the county if we want, would be to go from 300 South and 400 East up to Dave's Corner Market, down Mill Creek Drive to Sand Flats, down Mill Creek Drive, past Murphy Lane, past Spanish Valley, all the way to Aggie Boulevard to the highway, and look at those intersections, which are problem intersections, including putting in a traffic signal at Aggie Boulevard, which it needs. And we've been talking to UDOT, but this might be a way to make that work by bundling it with that. But that's a decision we don't need to make tonight. I just wanted to kind of give you that heads up. But I did want to say that we're going to add the Vision Zero goal, so you'll have an opportunity to review it. And if you like that in the transportation master plan on next Tuesday, that would be good for us to go pursue this Safe Streets and Roads for All money, if council wants us to do that. And UDOT has said they think we have a shot at that for a couple of projects, even though it's federal funds. And the applications are due September 15th, which is why, if it seems like we're putting the information out fast, it's because it's happening kind of fast. They finally got the program together, are out there, and if we want to respond, we'll just have to respond. And you know, we can do that if that's what y'all want us to do. So, did anyone say absolutely don't do a Vision Zero goal?
Oh, some of us probably have questions, but I mean, nobody wants accidents, so I mean, obviously it sounds good to have zero as your goal, but I am curious, do we as a city have any data? I think as a council member, or just maybe for our residents, it'd be interesting to know how many accidents we actually have, so we know how far you'd be going if you tried to go to zero. So is that something that we could get at some point?
Sure, that was actually done in the, I think one of the, not only in the transportation master plan did we evaluate it, which is why I think it can become our action plan, but also in the UDOT frontage road study that's recently completed. They did a pretty good analysis on fatalities and number of crashes. Yeah, so right now there's a lot of data, but I'll be happy to, Ronnie, to pull some out, extract it out of the plan and send it to you.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And UDOT has a pretty good web page. It's map-based, showing all sorts of accident information.
Yeah, crash data website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds great. I just don't know if there's trade-offs in terms of compromises with other aspects of the plan that are already developed, or if it's just going to be an add-on and more money to basically make things that we want to have happen faster.
I read all the information I could get on the Vision Zero goal data that's out there, and I'll certainly forward it on to y'all, and you can look and develop your own opinions on it, but I didn't see anything that would be a drawback if we adopted it. It doesn't hurt. I mean, if just because there are multiple policies in that transportation master plan that aren't commitments, right? They're kind of like, well, we'd like to do complete streets. We'd like to have better connectivity with our active transportation system, right? And we have maps even. But that's not, if council adopts the plan, that's not saying we're going to build every one of those. So I don't see anything that's adopted in that goal takes away from anything else, but, well, you know,
Okay.
from what I looked at, because I have the same, you know, if we do put enough sugar on there, we can't taste the salt, you know, I don't know.
Anybody else have questions for Chuck on Vision Zero goal while we're here? Okay, looks good.
Thanks. 400 East Bridge widening, quickly, we're reviewing the 60% design. Again, this was UDOT grant 50/50. This is the bridge over Pack Creek. We anticipate going to bid in September or October. At this point, because we scaled back, because we were able to scale back the scope a little bit, because of we foresaw the rise in construction costs, we're currently in the estimated budget. So that one's, we think, in good shape. As opposed to moving on to so we went through Hotspot Funding, we went through UDOT grant funds, and now we're looking at Federal Highway Administration, local government funding. Again, all cost share programs.
Hey Chuck, really quick, on
Yeah.
that bridge widening, I heard that the county, are they still working on running a drainage from up above, what is it?
Jackson?
Whatever it is. Yeah, Jackson Street, down to Pack Creek?
They are.
And is that gonna go, like, how does that, would that affect the bridge, or?
So they sent over their preliminary plans, and I told them they just need to come in on the downstream side. So that wouldn't impact what we're doing with the widening. If they came in on the upstream side, it would, but we don't want to do that. And they're like, oh yeah,
Okay,
we're fine.
okay.
That's a good point. But they are coordinating with us on that.
So they're continuing that project?
Yeah, they think they have funding for that.
Nice.
Don't jinx it.
Should I say I know they have funding? I don't know. The roundabout at 100 West and 400 North. I guess I would say the one thing that maybe that I have not mentioned to you before, that this has been talked about and planned since 2013. It wasn't something that just popped up out of the blue. So this has been worked because that intersection is such a mess. 75% plans are complete. The cost estimate's over budget. I have a spreadsheet which I'll like to show you quickly. And this is the last item I think I have, so I'll try and move through it. But it's an important one, I think. Yeah, there we go. Can you see that okay? So in 2017, we applied for funding. The cost estimate at that time was $1.1 million, of which the FHWA share was $1 million, and the city share would be $107,000. But we were on the 5-year plan. This is a 5-year program, so we didn't get to get the money that year. That was just, we wanted to get on the list. We got on the list. So in 2021, they came back and said, okay, it's your turn. So there was an FHWA and city agreement that we signed, council signed in 2021. And the cost estimate at that time was $1,157,000, so it had gone up $50,000. And at that time, the FHWA share was $1,078,000, and our share was $78,300. And that's what the contract we have with FHWA and UDOT currently has those numbers in there. Well, once we got into the pandemic and the cost of oil going up 30%, the cost estimates have gotten higher than the original ones. So at the 75% plans, and I've had our consultant, we've spent hours and hours trying to find ways to cut costs and to really look at the quantity costs. Part of the problem is exacerbated by we have to build it to UDOT standards, so we have to go through the UDOT process, which is the UDOT costs or what they want to look at, and we don't have all the issues that UDOT does, but they're going to bid the project. We don't bid the project if the project moves forward. So the cost estimate right now, breaking it out, $1.6 million would be just for the road if we did not try and do anything with the drainage. Of course, part of the whole project originally was to try and fix that dip section across 100 West. And that's about $388,000 under the current cost estimate. So currently we're at a $2 million cost estimate. One thing I wanted to point out is that FHWA has found another $420,000 that they've kicked in. So originally they were going to do $1,078,000, and now they're committing to $1.5 million. So they have kicked in additional money, but that's all they have, they say. They don't have any more. I've been pushing hard for ARPA funds or things like that, and they don't have that lined out. So what that would be, and this is according to the contract, the city's responsible for any additional funds. Whether or not we terminate the contract, we're responsible for all costs up to date, or whether we move forward, go to bid, and pay, let's say it came in at the $2 million number, that would be what it would be the $420,000 additional. And now if I go back to, 75% plans, we looked at the spreadsheet. So if we terminate the contract now, and it's on stop, I put them on stop work about 2 weeks ago till I could get to, maybe 3 weeks ago, till we could come and discuss this. If we terminate the contract now, we'll owe an additional $150,000 for the engineering and environmental work and drainage work that's been done. So it'll be $150,000 for a total of $227,500 spent. And if we do that, we end up with a 75% complete set of plans. If we go to bid, and this is what UDOT's recommending, because going to bid doesn't mean that we're going to award a bid. And UDOT won't award a bid until they have consent from the council, we do that. If we go to bid, we can pay up to an additional $420,000. That was on that spreadsheet a moment ago. And then we get the intersection and drainage fixed. So if you take the $420,000 that would potentially cost if we go to bid for construction, subtract the money we're on the hook for because of the contract up to now, that comes to $192,500. So in other words, for an additional $192,500 over what we will owe, if we cancel the project, we will get the project constructed. I know it's not good news, it's just a sign of the times. The only thing I can tell you is, as the cost of construction across the state are increased 30 to 50%, as I talk to my colleagues. So we don't have to decide tonight. We didn't agenda this for action, but we wanted to get the facts out to you. And I suspect, Madam Mayor, that Carly, in the near future, we'd probably want to come back, unless you get direction otherwise, and get a decision on whether to move forward. Because UDOT's fine with waiting for a little bit, and there's a small potential that if we get that SS4A qualifications, that we could use some of that money for this because of the multimodality and the safe routes to school part. And so that would drop that number. It's still an 80-20 fit, but instead of 192, we might be in for another 40 or 50 or something like that. So that's the other one. And UDOT thinks that that would be a project that would qualify. You know, they're not going to be the deciders. FHWA will be the deciders, but they know that this is not what anybody wanted to see, and they don't want it. They want the project to succeed as well because they've pushed through this far. So potentially, then we wanted to give you an update. Let you think about it. I'm happy to answer any questions right now if you have questions. And then as we go forward into the future, maybe in the next, not next council meeting necessarily, unless you decide you want it, then we could come back and get some further direction from council.
Any questions for Chuck? I know that we all talked about this at our last mayor council meetings, and I think I said, well, UDOT needs to find the money. But as Chuck explained to me, this is federal money, so it's really pass-through money. So UDOT really doesn't have any influence on contributing anymore, right?
That's correct. And the feds did come up with an extra $500,000.
Right.
But that's all they come up with.
Right. We'll talk about this some more when we meet. Any questions for Chuck?
Almost. Oh, I was just going to say that, last bullet, if we did go ahead and do the project and it cost us $500,000, that would end up being 25% of the total cost, and FHA would have ended up doing 75% of total cost, which is where we're at, like 80-20 for the SS4A, 75-25 is pretty much what the cost share are these days. That was just a special program where we were only putting in less than that. Okay, and that's all I had, unless there's other questions on other projects, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, thanks, Chuck.
You're welcome.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
More to come.
Yes.
All right, next on our agenda is our consent agenda. We have 3 items. The first is the approval of a residential property lease between the City of Moab and James Mcgann, and this is the 4-bedroom, 2-bed house out in Spanish Valley that we've talked about. And I believe we have a renter already, that's my understanding, so that's great. We also have the approval of the minutes from June 28th and the approval of the bills against the City of Moab in the amount of $299,615.34. I know that Ronnie had some late suggestions to the minutes. Ronnie, do you want to pull the minutes and then have meet with staff and make those changes, or are you prepared to vote?
I guess that's a question if other people want to see my suggestions to the minutes, or if they can be accepted or if they need to be discussed, outside of this meeting. Just so people know, I went through the minutes and I re-listened to part of the recording, and I made some corrections, but also I just asked the attorney some questions about how in the minutes you handle it when you have something like the Scots on the Rock event, whether 2 motions involved, and how that gets reported just accurately. So
I did speak with Nathan. He did get a chance to review, and he thinks it meets legal sufficiency, but that doesn't mean it can't provide a greater level of detail. But he's not concerned with them legally.
So I might suggest tabling the minutes, and then people can look at what I've suggested. But there were some things that were inaccurate, so I definitely want those things changed.
So we'll pull out those minutes, and then we'll table that until the next meeting when council and staff has a chance to look at your suggestions and address those. Is that okay? Okay.
I do. I assume if we make a motion here, we'll have an opportunity to ask some questions about consent agenda. I mean, I'm willing to make a motion, but I do have questions about the first item.
Yeah, so the motion would be to remove the approval of the minutes from June 28th. And so the consent agenda items that we would be approving are the residential property lease agreement and the payment of the bills. So I'll ask for a motion to consent to those 2 items.
I can move to table the minutes of June 28th until the next meeting and approve the consent agenda items of the approval of residential property lease between City Moab and James Mcgann, and then also the approval of the bills in the amount of $299,615.34.
Okay, so just for clarity, we'll have two motions. Ronnie's made a motion to approve the consent agenda for item 5.1 and then 5.3, and a motion to table the approval of the minutes until our next meeting on July 26th. A second to both of those motions.
I'll second both of them.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Ronnie, seconded by Kalen. Discussion, Ronnie, on motion on the consent agenda.
I'm fine with the motion. I just have a question about the first item. Yeah.
Okay,
Just a few questions because it's the first time we've done this. So obviously, this is the agreement between the city and the property owner. So just a question for staff. I take it there'll be a separate sublease or rental agreement with individual employees who end up living there?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And is that something we have to draft or just something we already have?
Being drafted right now by council.
Okay, and then it does get a little bit confusing only because of the word use, like the lease we're looking at, uses the word tenant, but it does identify the city as the tenant, but in our agenda summary, we do refer to the tenant, and in that context, it seems like we're talking about the employee we would actually rent to, so just so you know, that made it a little bit confusing, so I just wanted to double check, are the utilities going to be in the city's name, and then?
Yes.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then individual renters will end up
Will
paying the
reimburse
city.
us. Mm-hmm.
And I think my last question was, so obviously this is a 1-year lease, it can renew. We have an agreement with an employee, I think, for the first 6 months. So one of the questions was, since it does say that our intention is to use this for transitional housing for employees relocating, there's probably going to be no slowdown in people needing that. But if there was, I did have a question, if we have an overlap period with no transitioning city staff, could the city rent sublease this property out to non-city staff? I just want to, know what the council or the city intent is.
The intent is for city staff. I can't remember if it requires city employees to be used in this agreement. Lisa, do you remember? I don't think it does. Oh, Lisa, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at the language right now to see, I thought it was that there had to be an employee. So I'll find that and get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks. And just in case anyone's wondering, the reason I'm asking is, a resident or me could wonder like, oh, okay, the city's gonna, pay for this $1,700 a month. But we get that recoup by having employees in there. So if we have a period where no one's in there, you could argue, is that the best investment? So that's just why I'm asking.
It does say in the whereas is that it's the intent to use it for city employees. So we would be we would be paying the cost of any sort of lapse in coverage or in use.
Okay, I didn't know in the legal world does intent mean that's what you like to be doing, but not necessarily what you have to do, or in the legal world, does that mean that's the only thing you can do?
Well, typically, and Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not part of the agreement. The whereases are the prelude to the agreements, therefore we agree to. So we agree to what follows. Lisa,
Right.
Is that right?
You're right. The whereas is the intent and the policy decision that you make as the legislative branch in passing whatever it is you do. And in terms of this agreement, you say in the whereas language, this is to house employees who cannot find housing. I don't see it in the agreement that it's limited. And it's probably a simple fix in this. We could just simply say, I'm looking at the responsibilities of the tenant responsibilities. Tenant agrees to maintain its expense, fire and casualty, and we go down at the bottom. Tenant agrees that the rental will be to an employee of the city.
However, to clarify, I mean, it won't necessarily just be city employees living there. For example, someone might live there with their family who are not city employees, which is what we have in mind for.
Okay, I mean,
this
all I was
first
trying to
round.
figure out is this the first time I've done anything like this? So I didn't know if the city is leasing, but if for some reason we have, for some reason, the city employees are all covered, but we, know someone at the county who's really in need, if that person couldn't rent. But, so I'm just wondering from a legal perspective, can you write it that way? Just so, because it would also be tragic for the city to pay that rent and not have someone in need in there using it as housing. So anyway, I'm just trying to figure out how flexible one can be to maximize your chances that, there's someone who needs housing in that structure. Yeah.
More flexibility is certainly desired for that exact reason. We would like to just provide a need, and we don't want it to sit empty simply because of this agreement, and we could, recoup our costs and help with some essential worker housing. So Lisa, do you think it provides for that, or should we approve it with that addendum?
My sense is that it says in the whereas, the tenant wishes to lease the property with the intended use of providing transitional housing for the City of Moab employees. And that is the purpose that you're doing this lease agreement. Now, the idea that you might have other people who are in need and want to be covered and you have this available, that is not the intent of the lease agreement as it was drafted.
Right.
So in order to do that, it would either take an amendment, or you'd have to the lease agreement, or you would have to simply say, no, we're not going to let anybody in there who isn't in transitional need of housing, who is with the city as a city employee.
Does that include family members of city employees who want to live there?
Oh, surely. Yeah. It's just not an employee. It does include the mayor or whoever it might be that's coming in, whatever, not the mayor, but some employee that's coming in and their family members.
Okay.
I think we don't want to make this too complicated. I think, what you're referring to, Ronnie, I mean, if we bring somebody in that's in need, that's not a city employee, and then we have a city employee, and then we have no housing, it's just going to make it a lot more complicated, in my view. So I would suggest that we keep the language as it is.
Okay, but you guys understand what I'm saying. Like, say you have someone in there from January till June, and you don't have another employee transitioning until August. And if there's someone else, even in our sphere of essential workers, whether it's a medical person or a teacher or something who really could benefit from being in there for the month that it's vacant, we're saying we don't want to accommodate that.
Right, and so that's a policy decision. Do you want to accommodate that as a council?
I would prefer to. I don't want it to sit empty. I mean, I do think the likelihood is low that there won't be any transitioning city employees, but to me it would be tragic and somewhat irresponsible financially if it sat empty.
Okay, Kaylin, do you have any other discussion on this item?
I think having that flexibility could be beneficial.
Okay.
So I would support that.
Jason?
I'd avoid it. I think even if that house sits empty for 3 months and the city's paying on it, we may hire someone and need to find a place for them in 2 weeks, and if you have someone in there, it could be a 60-day process to get them out, and so I think that this is housing for the city, and it needs to be ready to go. We could have had a city employee whose home burned down and they need something really quickly, and if it's vacant, then it should be up for that. So I think that there could be times where it does sit empty for 2 or 3 months, and that's just part of the deal. But when we need it, we need it, And so I like the way it's written.
I would agree. I think the city is taking the risk, and then when you start to expand that pool of people, you get accused of playing favorites or nepotism of some kind. I think keeping it, like you said, Joette, just as simple as possible. I agree that the flexibility would be nice, but I think in this case we should just keep it a little bit tighter.
Luke?
Yeah, I see like the pros and cons to both sides. I think it doesn't hurt to have the flexibility in the language. We don't have to exercise that flexibility. If we want to move forward, we can still leave it open for 3 months with that provision in there. So I think to a certain degree, it's a little addendum that we can add to give us some flexibility. We don't know what's going to happen over the next year, but I would like to prioritize and focus it on just being city employee housing.
Okay, so this is a consent agenda.
Yeah.
So I think probably what we're going to have to do, since it looks like it's not a consent, is I'm going to ask whoever made the motion to withdraw their motion to consent agenda.
I think with me, I will withdraw my motion.
All right, and then remove this item also. And so the only consent agenda on this item at this time is the payment of the bills.
Okay, do you want a new motion?
Yes.
Okay, I move to approve payment of the bills in the amount of $299,615.34.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Seconded by Tawny. Motion made by Ronnie to approve the bills, seconded by Tawny. Discussion, Ronnie?
Nope.
Tawny? Nope. I don't need to do a roll call. I can say all in favor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 5-0. All right, so let's go back to item 5.1, approval of the lease agreement between the City of Moab and Jim Mcgann. And it sounds like, Lisa, that council members, I guess we need to make a motion to approve the lease agreement with the amended language to allow some flexibility, which, so that it does not have to necessarily be a city employee.
Well, there is language in the paragraph 21 that says amendments. No variations, modifications, amendments, or other changes to this lease will be binding upon the parties unless set forth in the written document that both parties have executed. And then you could say, if the building is unoccupied for a certain number of days or months, and there is no transitional housing demands apparently existing or that exist, the contract could be amended jointly by the parties.
Does that sound good? Okay, so I'll ask for a motion to approve this lease agreement with the suggestions that Attorney Lisa Waits has made. Did I say your name right, Lisa?
I
Watts.
wish I were Waits, like Tom Waits, but I'm Watts.
All right, I'll ask for a motion to approve the lease agreement with those corrections suggested by Lisa.
One question before you make that. I have, if the building's unoccupied for X number of what? For 60 days, 30 days, 90 days? What's your limit there? And there's two conditions. It has to be unoccupied, and it has to have that there's nobody in the queue waiting for transitional housing.
Can I,
Yes.
this contract is between the city and James Mcgann.
Mm-hmm.
The contract that we have with the tenant and the city could include that adjusted language, right?
Yep.
Does James McGann,
I can't hear him.
I think it's describing our relationship with what James will allow, right? So and what we are saying, what kind of tenants are going to be occupying it. So to be clear to him, it's like either they're city employees or they're not, yeah.
So what does James McGann want? Does he want this to be only city employees?
I don't know. That's the agreement that we made. That's how.
So if we change this agreement, it then needs to go back to James McGann to be
Yes.
to be approved by him.
Yeah, and I've been thinking
But he's
about.
approving this contract the way it is right now.
Right.
I do think, and Jason's point is a really good one, just for what it's worth. It may be, if this helps, say we have it sitting for 2 months, I think I still would recommend to you that we don't lease it in hopes that there is a city employee. I know I should have probably put that in there at the beginning, but I would just be like, we might need this at any moment, and I don't want to have to not be able to hire somebody because we have some sort of occupant. So,
I mean, there are times when it's going to sit empty, even if it's
right.
one tenant moves out and the other tenant's moving in, it's got to be cleaned or painted or whatever maintenance has to be done on it. There will be times when it's not occupied. Yeah. And if we
And after
If
4
the-
months,
If the water heater blows up in it and we, or Jim, whoever, is responsible for the maintenance, and you have to replace wallboard or floors or whatever, it could sit empty for reasons that aren't anyone's fault.
I guess I have a
So-
question. Is anyone willing to table this to ask Mr. Mcgann if he would be open to
the
this?
issue is we do need this approved because we have a tenant moving in at the end of July.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
No,
Can I make a motion?
sure.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the property lease between the city of Moab and James Mcgann as written.
All right, motion made by Jason, second,
I will second it.
seconded by Tawny. Any discussion, Jason?
No, just for the reasons that I stated before.
Tawny?
If we've got a tenant that needs to move into it, and they're going to be there for 6 months, if need be, we can revisit this.
Okay. Anybody else? Discussion?
No, I think that kind of turned me over, is like the fact that somebody is waiting on this. I think it makes sense to move forward with it as written.
Kayla?
I can support it for those reasons, but I would like to direct staff to bring the possibility up with Mr. Mcgann, because I don't find the rationale for not doing this that have been presented convincing. I think it's quite possible that in tenant turnovers, there will not be substantial work that's needed, and that there may, if you're doing a new hire, that takes a month anyway. And so if there's an essential employee in the community that you can offer a 1 month rental to, that just gives them time to get their feet under them, and there's virtually no possibility that the city's going to have a new hire in that time, I see no reason for the city to deprive themselves of that income, nor of depriving an essential worker, even if they're not a City of Moab employee, from having housing for that month. So I'm willing to approve it, but I would like you to bring this up with the landlord.
James.
Sure. Ronnie?
Yeah, exactly what Kaylin said.
Okay. Keep in mind, this is only a year. It gives us an opportunity to see how it works out. And, if it might be something that we're just going to say in a year, this isn't worth it. So it's only a year. The reason that we're doing this is because we felt like it was a really cost-effective way to get some housing out there for our police department more than anything. All right, motion made by Kaylin, seconded by Tawny. All in favor of that motion? Oh, sorry, who did I say? Kaylin? Sorry. Jason, seconded by Tawny. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right, minutes. We have a motion to table the minutes from June 28th to the next meeting, July 26th.
Are you asking for a motion to table them?
Yes.
I move to table the minutes from the June 28th, 2022 meeting until the next regular meeting of this body.
Okay, second.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Kaylin, seconded by Ronnie. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I vote. All right. Ronnie, if you wouldn't mind, if in council reviewing Ronnie's input that she has, and get back to her and Carly with any questions or concerns, that would be great.
Fix the link on the shared document.
You did?
Should be able to just click that.
Great, very good. All right, thank you. Next on the agenda, we have Jessica. It's new business. It's a proposed ordinance 2022-12, an ordinance amending the Moab Municipal Code, section 2.52.010, establishment, the composition to reduce the number of planning commission members from 7 to 5. And this is an ordinance that the planning commission will also have to update their bylaws to reflect this. And at this point, we have 5 commissioners, so we don't need to appoint any more. So if you all approve this reduction, then we're all set, ready to go, except for the planning commission will have to change their bylaws. Jessica, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm really just here to answer any questions that y'all might have. It's a pretty straightforward submission.
Caitlin?
Oh, go ahead, Ken.
So this is a question about the bylaws, so I realize it's not totally germane to this ordinance, but as it is now, a quorum is 4, if I understand correctly. And so that would require that at least 3 of the 7 vote positively to pass a motion.
4 of the 7.
4.
Yeah, 4, wouldn't it?
But as I read it, it requires a majority of those present.
A quorum is 4 of 7.
Yes?
So that way you have to have then 3 of the 4, you have to have 3 to 1. You can't have it 2 to 2 and have a motion pass. With
Right,
4 people
that's what I
present.
said. 3 of the 7 have to vote to pass something. So, so just changing, so with this change, we would go to 5. Quorum would be 3, and it would take 2 to pass something. So we've gone from basically, ideally, 7 people, 7 members of the community advising us, to potentially 2 being able to forward a recommendation.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, some bodies say that in order for a motion to pass, it has to be a majority of the whole body, rather than just a majority of the quorum. And given the reduction in size of the body, which I do support, I'm wondering about the possibility of changing those bylaws in that manner. And I'm not sure if that's something that we can do, or if it's something that the Planning Commission would do, and that would just be our advice to them, if the rest of the council agrees. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, no, good.
So it always requires at least 3. Something to move forward, it needs 3 votes.
Yes.
Yes, always a quorum. Got it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's true for the water board, too.
right. So it's spelled out in a separate document. Okay, well, thank you for checking that.
Yeah. And Carly and I are looking at those procedures, so,
Council, at least.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, great.
yeah.
That was my only question
All
on
right.
this.
Thanks, Caitlin. Very good point. Ronnie?
I know I agree with Kaylin, so does that mean we need to somehow change or alter a motion on
No.
this? If
No.
if my vote is contingent on, things working the way Kaylin is saying and not letting 2 people, make a decision, that's my concern too, so.
Yeah, that would be in the bylaws. We're just changing the ordinance that reduces the number from 7 to 5. That's all the action that we're taking. The Planning Commission will amend their bylaws. I'll ask for a motion to approve proposed ordinance 2022-12.
I move to adopt ordinance 2022-12, an ordinance amending Moab Municipal Code Section 2.25.010, establishment composition, to reduce the number of Planning Commission members from 7 to 5 members.
Motion made by Kalen. Do I have a second by Jason? Any further discussion, Kalen? Jason?
No.
Anybody else on the council? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Jessica. Next up, we have Annie to talk to you about the RAP Tax Advisory Committee application. Now, this is just a application process to appoint people to that advisory committee. I know it says possible action, but there really is no action necessary because this is an administrative thing. We just wanted you all to know what the process is and provide Annie with any feedback if there's something that you would like to have done differently. And so right now the process is Annie will make the recommendations to me, and then I'll make the appointment with council's consent. Correct?
Yeah, so like the mayor said, this is just an update as we're going to go out to the public maybe this week with the application process. And so I do want to make one clarification on the attachment that had the draft application. I did not include the improvements that the council had made to the committee structure at that last meeting. So that includes the 2 members that will have expertise in either recreation and sports or art. They can live within Grand County. The other 3 members must reside within the city limits, and there is an ex officio from council on the committee.
Great.
And so it also outlines the timeline that we think it is. I have gotten some feedback from the community that they feel this timeline is fairly long. I think it's realistic, but we will do everything we can to move this along. But once we go for a month of having the applications open, probably take another month to review and get those back to council. And then we need to reconvene the meeting or the committee for the first time. We'll have to adopt bylaws. We'll have to go through a rating criteria, an application process, and get all that back to council for either review or approval. And then actually do a call for projects. And that would be open for, I would say, a minimum of a month, if not longer. Review those and come back to council. So it sounds like a long process. We can try to streamline it, but I think that is realistic.
Questions? Kaylin?
I'll start with a comment. I don't think the process is too long. I mean, given the city's budget cycle, I realize people may be eager to apply and receive funding, but within the grinding wheels of our bureaucracy, I think it's realistic. And it's just within our processes, it's not that long, I don't think. I did have a question, which I haven't checked to see if you answered it on the shared document,
Okay.
but I didn't get an alert. It was a suggestion that for the conflict of interest, that there's a lot of information, but it boils down to a one-sentence question. Do you work for, volunteer with, or otherwise involved in a recreation, parks, or arts organization that may apply for REV tax funds? And I just wondered about saying, do you or a family member, since it seems like that is included in the conflict of interest criteria.
Right, and I did get a public comment about thinking that was too restrictive. And so that sentence of saying, do you volunteer, there's a, depending on what level or what role you play as a volunteer, it may not be a conflict. But just to kind of put it out there that if this is something that you do, take in second thought and look through the conflict of interest.
Well, yeah, and for the committee to consider, and for, people appointing it to at least consider in the name of.
Right, so that you have the information when you're making the call.
Right, yeah, so it's not exclusive necessarily, it's just to help make good, considered decisions about who sits on the board.
That's how I interpreted it too.
Okay, good.
I like the family member idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's the same for city employees, for elected officials, yeah.
Ronnie?
So I had a few questions, Annie. Was there ever any consideration that all 5 members would have some kind of background or knowledge about recreation, arts, and parks? I mean, I guess was the sense that it might be hard to get that many people with that background, or?
No, but I think the thought was that there are people that don't have to have that expertise to have an opinion about how this money should be spent within the community. And there is a chance that more than one could. I mean,
okay.
It would,
And then because of the initial staggering of 2 and 3 year terms for the first class of committee members, does it make any sense, since 3 people will have 3-year terms and 2 will have 2-year terms, that we say that those people who have true expertise in arts and parks and rec be in that 3-year group? I'm just thinking of continuity, and because there'll be a learning curve, and those are the ones presumably with more expertise. I didn't know if the group thought that made sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great suggestion, and we can.
It is, except for when you do those kind of staggered terms, it could be, then you're going to have to make sure you get that particular, it gets complicated when you start going down the line, when you do in my experience, when you start looking for specifics and then you stagger the term, it can be kind of complicated if you can't find somebody that meets that qualification for that particular term.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think your comment is well taken, and as we go through the recommendation process, we'll consider those factors.
Right, and who should have those 3-year terms,
And then another question was, so I know there had been some discussion about council members sitting on the committee and not voting, and I think early on, but I might be getting all of my groups confused, wasn't there also discussion about a staff member also sitting on it?
Yeah, the staff member will be chairing it, but not voting.
Okay, just so that's, okay. maybe that can be explained somewhere, just so people know kind of
Gotcha.
what group of people they might be working with or when they apply. And then that last question was, for people listening or who might be interested, since, August 15th will probably be here soon and that's the deadline, what's kind of our outreach to let people know that they can apply for this, and where do they go to express interest?
Right, so we'll
Yeah.
obviously establish a webpage for that, and I'll be working with Lisa on getting the word out in a variety of ways.
Thanks.
Questions from anybody else? Luke, Tawny, Jason? All right, you got it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Annie.
So when will you be making the recommendations to me?
So right now we have a deadline of August 15th for the
Okay.
applications, and so I would imagine the first meeting in September.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, Annie. All right, Kelly, you're up. I'm hoping that this is a nice dynamic conversation about, it always is with you all, and I mean that in a very positive way, to discuss the special event criteria. And I think, looking forward to having the conversation. And Kelly, how do you want to just make a presentation and let people ask you questions, or how would you like to go forward with this?
Yeah, so I was going to give a bit of a kind of explanation about the process and then go into what's on the agenda documents and then get some feedback. So,
Great.
yeah, so in looking at the council looking for an overview on the criteria, I wanted to give you kind of what that process is for applicants as well as staff. So the first step in the special events process is the application, but it's by no means the end. So someone applies, and then staff will work with them from that application process all the way up into the event as well as after the event. So some events we're going to be, really communicating a lot back and forth depending on how detailed they are, and then others, they're not as complex. They won't need as much staff time. So, for example, if you have street closure, you need PD assistance, you need parks cooperation, your event will be more complicated and you'll need more staff time to review. Whereas if you're just doing a small element in the city and then the remainder of your event is in the county or on BLM lands, it might be more simplified from that. So that's just the first step, and we do continue to communicate with people through that process. So that's why that time frame is really important, so that we know we're covering our bases. Also, to add to that, sometimes not all of the paperwork is necessarily in that original application. So if you're, say you need an encroachment permit from the streets department if you're trying to close streets, you can request that in the original application, but it might not be present at that point, and that's when you'll work with Public Works and the streets department to get to that point where, okay, everything's set to go, but it's not going to be fine-tuned at the application process. So staff reviews each application. Each department has things that they're looking at. Parks will be looking at, okay, do we have a trash plan? Do we have a restrooms plan? Streets will be looking at, what's our closure look like? How's that safe for the public, etc. So that's, each department goes through on each event to make sure these boxes are getting checked. And if it's not in that original application, we're communicating with organizers to say, okay, this particular step is missing. Let's make sure we're communicating that and getting that all set so that the event is successful. Something to note in this is that a lot of the established events that have been going on here for years with organizers that have been doing this for a long time, those events typically they know which permits they need. They know if they need city, Grand County, BLM, etc. And those applications tend to have more details and they know what they need to be doing. Whereas if you're a new event, you might not know, oh, okay, I need to do city as well as county permits. So those ones will take a little bit longer. Also, just kind of to note, in the attachments, we listed the 2021 and 2019 events held in the city. That didn't include the city-produced events, but we go through that same process. So events like the Easter egg hunt, the turkey trot, Red Rock Arts Fest, all of those go through the same process. It's just internally. So we make sure to communicate with streets, with parks, with police department to make sure we're going through all of those elements as well. So some of the things that staff were looking for in terms of the criteria that are gone over, we included some examples, so Park City as well as Grand County. And this is something that we can incorporate into our the elements we already review. So we go over things, safety, traffic, parks concerns, but if we'd like to, we can create a matrix with a scoring system that includes all of the elements already considered as well as additional ones if we'd like to include those. And that can be something that we come up with as a staff that we go through as well as can be provided to council and something to consider. So in researching other entities, we've looked at different examples and what's considered. Some of those are included in the packet, but specifically, we were looking over the intensity of the event and the noise elements. And so these are some things that we can be monitoring throughout the rest of the year for events. We can be asking for more detailed applications. We can ask, for example, if an event has happened in the past, we can ask for some statistics on what prior year attendance, noise levels were. Those kinds of things can be asked for. If it's a new event, the staff is open to having a pre-application meeting. So if you have a new event that you'd like to bring to Moab and you're not, aware of that process, staff can meet with you and give you that outline and let you know what those expectations are going to be before you fill out that application so that you're a little bit more prepared in doing so. So staff is open to some feedback on this. We had a couple ideas about monitoring the noise, whether that's houses across the street, a block away, 5 blocks away, intensity of the event, how much description needs to be in each application. But that's the general process. So any questions you have?
Okay. Let the discussion begin. Go ahead.
Thank you for putting this together. I think the concerns that I'm most familiar with from the community are noise impacts. So I'm interested in having both more quantitative feedback about the monitoring that was mentioned earlier in the meeting. So I'm looking forward to that. And then I'm interested to having more explicit limits for loudness of noise as an exception to our regular noise standards, and possibly time limits for those.
That's what, I was going to say, like, kind of the same things. Is I'd like to see, like, you have, like, this criteria, compatible to neighborhood. What's compatible to a neighborhood? What are the set of guidelines that are compatible with a neighborhood? What are activities that complement the ambiance and aesthetics of an area, Just so that, like, when people come in and they have these events, they can go through these guidelines and go, oh, we don't meet the requirements of being compatible to a neighborhood, or something. So that people have all the information up front, and we take away opinions, or I don't know, varying people's, what they want to see,
Right, and so those were some examples. We're aware that some of the things on there might be a little bit more objective than others. So the city guidelines that we can come up with, that matrix, it can look a little bit different so that it's more clear for those applicants and for the people reviewing the application.
No, but I think this is great. Like, yeah, I think this is really good.
Ronnie?
Sorry, I'm scrolling through. So I had a few questions about how we currently do things. So do we currently have a, what's the word I'm trying to think of? A process or a check sheet by which we meet with every event afterwards to debrief?
There's not a set checklist. That's just based off kind of what each department views from the event. So if you have a parade and you're blocking off certain streets and issues are run into via safety concerns from the PD or the streets department, then those are taken in. But currently there's not a specific checklist for something like that.
Okay, I mean, I guess I have some asks of the group, if they're open to them. I would like the city to commit to having that, only because I think it takes out inconsistency of maybe some people getting that and some not, and it also reduces the chance that communication might not happen, where people need to know, just gives them the opportunity to know what went well, but what, if anything, might need to go better or change, or they need to be aware of the next year around. And I would really prefer a process whereby that happens 1 to 2 months after an event, so people have plenty of time to think about it. So I guess that's a question for colleagues, if that's something that they would support, because it seems like that would set us up better. But I also wanted to find out, there was reference in Nathan's, I think one of his answers, maybe it was one of Ben's, about how there are 8 staff involved in the CERT committee. I was just curious, so obviously that's probably going to be law enforcement and streets, and then who all does that cover?
So currently we have the city managers, we have the streets department, public works, parks, recreation, arts.
Police, yeah.
Police, yes.
Okay, cool. That just helps us all learn the process better. And then, so we saw the 2019 and 2021 lists of events. I was wondering if the council could get, and I know 2022 is still coming about because some people who have repeat events or new events haven't applied yet, but it would help me, and I think help all of us to understand the load on our venues and just the timing of things to also have the city events on this list. When I was reading this and asking if it was a complete list, I started to make a list of ones I didn't see on the list, and most of them were city affiliated, but there is some stuff on the list that's city affiliated already. But there were some other events I know that have occurred and seem to be recurring that I didn't see on here. So that would be one of my requests as we try and kind of continue this discussion, because I think that just helps us all know what's being used more. Like right now, it looks like Lions Park is pretty underutilized. And just to be able to digest some of that, it helps to have all of it in one place, even if some of them are city events. Like I think just off the top of my head, not even counting the ones that you mentioned, I came up with 8 other city events. So it is a significant number. So I'd just love to see that. At one point, I was told that most organizers actually violate their permit, and that's very concerning to me. So I wanted to understand the process of how that's dealt with, and I kind of, as a council member, would like to be aware when that happens. And I'm just saying to colleagues, I kind of feel like if we get complaints about an event, we should revisit the process for special events, because once we're getting complaints about them, that becomes, to a certain extent, a potentially legislative issue. And I do feel like it's neither appropriate or fair for staff to have to deal with that stuff. And maybe that's one reason, this last event got passed on to us, but I'd rather have the process spelled out more carefully. I also think that some of the process problems we've seen that could be improved are sometimes maybe council members at the city council email address get complaints about events, but the staff on the CERC don't necessarily see those. So I'd like to see better communication about that. I know I talked with the city manager and the mayor, and they thought it was a good idea about getting a copy of the OSTA rental requirements, just as an example to look at, because people have said that it would be good to look and compare at those, and they thought that was a good idea. So I didn't know if we'd done that yet, but I was putting that on my wish list. In terms of, when several of us started, it used to be the council that looked at events, and then at some point, those that were smaller or repeat got passed on to the staff. So we don't see a lot of it anymore. I would kind of like to revisit that just because we have a new council and I don't know what people want to be doing. But one of the things we did as a council when we did that was we were looking at all the paperwork, so we were cross-checking, say, what events, what hours an event was requesting, and we were cross-checking that with the noise ordinance and what we consider different hour stipulations at different parks. And I'm sure staff is probably still doing that, but we kind of lost the communication on the council end for us to think about when exceptions like Kaylin's have been talking about are happening. And I do feel like the council holds some responsibility, since we're elected, to be aware of when we are effectively making exceptions. Like if we say, okay, we're not going to have noise on a Sunday till 9, but we're approving an event that's effectively starting at 8, then, we do bear some responsibility, in my opinion, for telling neighbors, okay, we're not going to do stuff before 9 on a Sunday, but then doing it. So I'd like just better awareness about that. So I think, in my opinion, to a certain extent, it would help the council, since there are several new people, to discuss what it is they want to take on and what they want to leave with the staff. And I also, in reading the comments on the shared document, noted that Jason had asked some questions about the historic agreement with the school district about the ball fields and some of the city responsibilities with that. So I was going to ask, I know staff's been going over some of our historic agreements, and some of them were handshakes and some of them were in writing. It sounds like this one was in writing. But I was going to ask that be reviewed and we get a report back so that we all know and can digest, if we have responsibilities we aren't meeting about that agreement, or better ways that we could be honoring that agreement. And the final question or comment I got from a resident related to this was about Park City's green events criteria and being excited about those. And I do think those look good. It wasn't really clear to me from just having the form, kind of the context of how they use it, because they talk about, I think, the regular versus the extraordinary measures people can take, but I wasn't sure, like, do they pay a lower event fee if they're in the extraordinary category?
My understanding was like the ranking of it. So your event is ranked as A extraordinary, B kind of in the middle, and then a level that's not necessarily approved. So not the fee structure, but the ranking of the event itself. Yeah. So I wouldn't mind some follow-up with that, or I don't know if they're interested council members who'd like to look at it, because obviously there's some things Park City has access to that we don't. Like, I don't think some of the compostable stuff necessarily. I don't know, Kaylin, we're not hot enough to do anything like compostable food containers, right? Nothing like that.
We have no composting program now.
Yeah. So, but I think it would be interesting to look at that list. But then my other ask would just be that that we step it up as a city, because I don't think it's unfair to ask event organizers to do stuff that we ourselves aren't doing. So I wouldn't mind helping someone work on that, but I think, I'd love to ask organizers not to use bottled water, but then, we better not be using them here either. So I guess that was my list of stuff. I'll let someone else go through their list.
So I guess out of all those things on the list, because there was a lot of requests for just more information, out of that list, what would you like to have considered in the actual criteria for approving an event?
Well, to me, there probably should be a discussion before event approval about this body and to what extent, if any, they want to make changes. Like, if there are complaints about events, do you guys want that to come to council? What, if anything, do you want to see as council? You're a new council, do you not want to see any events and pass it all to the staff? Do you still want to see new ones?
But I don't think that's I don't think that's what the criteria is, what we're discussing tonight. I think what we're discussing tonight is what is the criteria that we want potential eventories, I guess there's probably a better way to say that, organized applicants to follow in order for staff or the council for that matter to decide if this event qualifies. So that's what we're asking, that's what we're talking about.
Okay, well, if you want to discuss intensity and noise, and one of the questions was about the application process, so a lot of my questions are related to that, but and conditions. But certainly in terms of noise, I think because of some of the information that was raised to us late in the game, say about needing findings of fact and conditions of law, say in our noise ordinance, that I would like to know is if someone's going to the trouble to collect noise information now, do they need to be doing it in a certain way so it's submissible instead of just randomly collecting? So I think that stuff would be helpful. I know our packet says we have decibel readers and that we could get decibel or get display readers. So I'd like to know the difference between those and what the cost of the display readers would be.
Okay, so it sounds like your issue that you would really like this special events application process to include is managing the noise.
Noise and intensity,
Okay.
because they do cross over.
Okay. Luke?
Yeah, I'm kind of in line with what a lot of the other council members said in terms of just trying to provide as much like objective criteria so that once we set our standards, we make it as easy as possible to make sure that we're applying those standards equally across all applicants. In terms of a couple of thoughts, I do like the kind of additional or like supplemental checklist that like Park City did, and I don't know if this would be possible, but potentially for kind of improving ranking or something, if there could be some sort of commitment to donate like a certain % of proceeds or ticket sales to a nonprofit or potentially some sort of activity or something in the community, just to make sure that these things are kind of, and it's not a requirement, it's an optional thing that they can kind of choose to participate in to make sure that we are giving back to the community for events that potentially do have a negative impact on some of the surrounding areas. And then in terms of noise and stuff is potentially looking at limiting the number of like concurrent noise producing events so that if like the ball fields get rented out, we don't have like an amplified concert at like every single corner of the event area, I guess. And then kind of maybe piggybacking off of what Ronnie had been talking about, a debrief is that on the application itself, we might be able to have a section, once again, it's not a requirement, but it's like if this is a continuing event from previous years, like have organizers participated in like a debrief. And that could, if they have, that shows a willingness for them to take into consideration the concerns of the community. But if not, it doesn't necessarily like disqualify them from actually being granted the permit.
Tawny?
No, I pretty much agree with what Lucas said. I think, I don't even know if you call it a debrief at the end, but maybe just, you know, a short meeting with the event organizers. I don't know, a month or so after the event. Just not everybody that has a complaint is going to complain to us. So I'm not sure that that's a really good criteria to base something on if two people complain, but people are not going to send us an email and say that was a great event. You just kind of have to gauge that with, the reaction that is out in the community. But I do think that meeting with them afterwards and just giving them feedback, even if it's just what we've heard, is helpful. And giving them feedback based on what we see, what we've seen work in the past, or where we've seen problems before. So I think that's a good thing to do. I guess I would be interested in knowing, and this doesn't have anything to do with the criteria, I'm not quite sure how you measure noise or intensity. There are lots of different kinds of noise, and what one person thinks is an intense event may not be so much to somebody else. I did, as I went through that packet, I did notice that, Swanee Park gets used an awful lot. And we've had issues with people over there before. So I think just keeping up the communication with the neighbors and the people that those events impact the most, and possibly looking at where we do have suitable venues for some of those events so that we can spread them around. Otherwise, I think, I think staff is on the right track here with what they're pursuing.
Anybody else? Do you need, Kelly, are you getting enough? Do you feel like you?
Getting too much?
It's good. Okay, so why don't we, with the information that you've got and working with Carly and Annie, come up with, the next iteration of the application process and bring it back to us in a couple weeks, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
And just as a reminder too, Annie is going to be doing a parks management review this year. And so the question that Jason brought up about the ball field and the agreement with the school district, I'm sure will be included in that management plan.
We have a few deed restrictions on important properties, so it's worth making sure we're using them according to deed restrictions or, conditions of conveyance, all of those. We do, it's good to do an inventory. It's a good suggestion.
And I do think that, I really appreciate Joseph Lima providing that service for us. But I also think it would be good for us to make sure that what he's doing is like there's some consistency, so that we know that what he's doing is accurate and meets what we would want to have done. So anyway, thank you for all the work on this, Kelly, and more to come on this as well. So
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
all right, you're still up. The next item is the adoption of the findings of facts and conclusions of law for the approval of the Scots on the Rocks 2022 special event permit application. And just as a reminder, the decision on this application has already been made. It's been approved. And the staff and our council has provided the findings of facts and conclusions of law that you guys expressed. And so the purpose of this is if you have any questions or changes that you think you need to make, that this would be the time to do it. Otherwise, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve, ratify the findings of facts and conclusions of law. Ronnie?
I have some questions for Lisa. Are you still there, Lisa?
Let me text her. Oh, there she is.
Yes, I am.
Okay, great, thanks. Hopefully you had a chance to review the stuff from our last meeting, or Nathan had a chance to fill you in, because some of my questions are pretty specific.
I did.
Okay, thanks. So we haven't done, a findings of fact and conclusions of law document quite like this before, so some of this is just learning about the process of what a document like this should look like. So one of my questions to you has to do with, let me just scroll here in my document.
So Ronnie, you've asked these questions of council? Or have you asked them already?
No.
Oh, okay.
So thanks, Lisa. So I wasn't sure, when you construct a document like this, is it appropriate to indicate, say, in under the findings of fact, under item 7, what an actual vote was? Is it considered part of the findings of fact that a vote was 3-2 as opposed to just saying it was approved?
That's a factual statement that would be accurate. You could put that in if you wanted to.
Okay, I would request that findings of fact item 7 indicate that the initial denial vote was 3-2. I would also request under conclusions, just before conclusions of law, the last finding of fact item 17, I would request that the approval vote is noted as 3-2.
That's factual. That's a finding of fact.
Okay. I also did not know, granted we're a small community, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just going to ask you, let's see. Okay, there was a little bit of conflicting information or just, from history of what happened. So under findings of fact 11D, it does note communicating participants need to stay in the designated park event space, for example, not practicing or tuning instruments in the street or in front of neighborhood houses. What was unclear to me was, is that read by law as if it just has to be within the park boundary, or could you practice other places outside the park boundary that aren't specified here, like the Sun Court or whatever?
I don't know the answer to that. The finding of fact here is that the potential mitigation measures discussed were these, and among them was communicating places to stay for practicing. Parenthetically, I think it was an example. For example, not practicing or tuning instruments. It doesn't say excluding other things or at the very least these things. It just says, for example.
Gotcha. And then are you interested in errors in the document?
Surely.
So under conclusions of law 3, it starts off with respect to condition C. I believe someone meant to reference condition B.
The updated document says B, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
We caught that,
I
yeah.
read it as it was in the packet, so the version I read was that way. And then when we met on the 28th, the motion was to make corrections and things that I had noted, and some of what we talked about isn't specifically listed here, and I don't know that it needs to be, but it was just a question for you. For example, we discussed that the facility agreement, number of days and charges would have to be adjusted. So do I need to worry if that's not in here?
Facility agreement and number of days would have to be adjusted.
Yeah, Lisa, there were errors in the facility agreement about how we would calculate the fee for the agreement, but they haven't signed that agreement yet. I don't believe that's part of the application approval.
Okay, well, I'm just asking because
so that
at our
happens
meeting
later.
said, we were going to address. And then, let's see. Sorry, just making sure. And then, can I just ask, do we know where these off-site concerts are going to be? It's just mainly so I know that they're not on city grounds, so I know that.
I don't know the answer to that one. I don't know what section you're referring to in the conclusions of law.
Okay, no,
this
has to do with I'm just trying to make sure that there isn't some other city impact I need to know about. So I take it these off-site concerts are not going to be on city property, right?
I wouldn't know that. Is that in the findings of fact or the conclusions of law?
No, but it was
About
explained at our
off-site
last
concerts?
meeting that they would be off-site. So I'm just trying to understand, do I have another application coming, or?
Well, it would probably require an application
Okay.
to use the city facility, depending on the nature of the use. I mean, if it's a private party, not necessarily, but if it's open to the public and meets the level 1 and level 2 requirements, it would.
Okay, great. And I am just going to restate for your benefit, Lisa, that I take issue with findings of fact item 13C, which says that the bagpipe band competition is moving to the east side of the field. As I said in the June 28th meeting, it was always supposed to be on the east side of the field. So the maps we were given in 2021 and both applications in 2022 showed it occurring there. So the fact that it didn't occur on that side doesn't really have it moving, it just has it occurring where it should have been. So I just like that on the record.
Well, you simply could say under 13C, maintaining the bagpipe band competition to the east side of the field. If you're saying it was going to always be on the east side, and that you think is the factual misstatement, you can simply say that it's going to remain there.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is it was supposed to be there from the start, but it wasn't held there. And then we were presented documents saying, leading us to believe it was there, but then other documents saying it was going to move there. So anyway, I'm just saying I would like someone to pay attention to detail in the future, and technically it's not moving, but yeah, anyway, it was in the wrong place last time, so it's not really maintaining there because it wasn't there the last time. But that's it for me.
Thanks, Ronnie. Anybody else have questions for Lisa on this document? I'll ask for a motion.
I will move to adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law for the approval of the Scots on the Rocks 2022 special event permit application.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Tani, seconded by Jason. Discussion, Tani?
No.
Jason? Anybody else? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Is that,
Let's do a roll call if it's going to be split.
okay, roll call? Tani?
Aye.
Kaylin?
No.
Luke?
Aye.
Ronnie?
No, and I'll specifically cite conditions of law, item 5. I do not agree with it.
And Jason?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2. Okay, thank you, Lisa, for your
you.
involvement in this. Really appreciate it. And then we're going to go to Carly with her report.
All right, council, good evening. Some exciting administrative reports for you tonight. I know this is your favorite part of the evening. This might be good news to some residents. In preparation for possible summer monsoon rains that are coming up probably this summer, the city will provide sand and sandbags for the public beginning July 22nd, so next 2 Fridays from now. Sand and bags will be available at the Public Works Building, which is at 470 Cane Creek Boulevard, from 8 to 4 on Fridays. From here on out, people are asked to bring a shovel. They can fill as many bags as they need. We have about 50,000 of them. And just be sure to check in with the admin office at the Public Works Building when you enter the yard, just to let them know that you are back there. Another fun item, the Parks Department is partnering with the State Division of Wildlife Resources to stock the Old City Park Pond with round-tailed chub within the next month or so. You might be aware that we cleared some invasive species from that pond to make room for the chub. They are currently being collected in the Dolores River, but once they are relocated to the pond, we will provide education and information to the community about this conservation effort. So pretty good use of that pond. The Utah League of Cities and Towns is holding its annual convention in Salt Lake City, October 5th through 7th. So please let me know if you would like to attend, and we can arrange for your registration and your travel and accommodations. Similarly, we have there are some cast and mountain towns events that are happening this fall, I believe September and October. If you are interested in participating, I've heard from you, Kaylin, we're going to be reaching out for the Mountain Towns event. Just let me know. And we have as an addendum to that, we have a new admin in my office. Her name is Sasha. So you might be getting emails from her, and she'll be helping to coordinate all of those things. Finally, Moab Tomorrow Together will be holding 6 facilitated focus groups here in town from August 1st through the 3rd at various venues. The purpose of these groups is to synthesize all community input to date into specific topic areas. These groups will be critical to the strategic pillars and actions which will be included in our strategic action plan. You can register to participate in these focus groups on the project website. We're also reaching out to our mailing list and to all the folks who have already participated at some level in this effort. So please feel free to invite people who you might think would be constructive during those focus groups. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Carly. All right, we move on to mayor and council reports, and we'll start with you, Tawny.
Mine is really easy because I haven't had any meetings the last couple of weeks. They're all next week and the next week.
All right, we'll hear from you at our next meeting
will.
then. Kaylin.
I attended a housing task force meeting, and work continues on the updated housing plan. And I attended the Community Renewable Energy Agency board meeting, and there are more resources on the Utah 100 Communities website about basically, it has to do with the affordability component, and it's mapping of the cost, Rocky Mountain Power customers who are deemed cost burdened, and for us, the mapping isn't that interesting because we're basically just one block, but it does give the number of customers that are cost burdened, and that component of the program will hopefully address. The mapping's a little bit more interesting in some of the larger communities where there's geographic differentiation. So you can check that out if you want. Solid Waste Special Service District had a special meeting having to do with interim management and recruitment of the new executive director, which is coming along. And the Travel Council did not have a meeting in July, and I attended the community concert, which I would say that it was pleasurably noisy, and it seemed the intensity was perhaps, I don't know if it's intensity or density. It seemed both more dense in the participant seating area, as well as there were more people outside the boundaries of the fencing. So, but I think it seems like a very popular community event.
I think that it is. That's great. Luke.
Yeah, I also attended both of the free concerts at the parks, and I just wanted to thank everybody who's involved in setting that up. It's really great kind of having those community events again, and I feel like the acts have been really fantastic this year so far. I attended a trail mix meeting earlier today. There's discussion about developing a trail below Falcon Flow up in Sand Flats to try to get some of the bikes off the roads, particularly to get them away from like Dave's Crack, as that's a pretty auspicious area with a lot of people kind of driving somewhat recklessly through every once in a while. Not a safe place for bikers to be. It looks like up in Klondike, parking and camping is now officially only in designated sites. We got a report from the Forest Service that there's going to be a full closure of Geyser Pass from August 8th through 31st, where they're going to be continuing earthwork that started last year. They're going to be widening the road to an average of 20 feet. And then there's going to be a new parking lot at the Trans-LaSalle Trailhead and improved parking at Clark Lake. The report from the Trail Mix team is they're still hiring for trail ambassadors. Currently, it's for a non-motorized one, and I think with the intention of having a subsequent motorized trail ambassador. The ambassadors have really been kicking butt since 2022 began. They've encountered 36,000 visitors. That's between 2 and 4 individuals, and have had like the full kind of spiel with about 21,000 of them. And eventually they're going to be branching out to a volunteer trail ambassador program. They do have applications that are being accepted until August 31st, and the training dates will be September 1st or 3rd. You might want to go to their website. There's a QR code that I can't really read into existence for the record. And then It sounds like they're still working on their partnership with the All Trails app to try to kind of direct people to like waste deposit spots. So they are lauding their 5 drop-off locations for WAG bags now around the community, which is a great service that's very much needed. And then just a random thing from within the community I've noticed, I know of several people who have gotten handwritten notes from a vacation rental company identifying how much they would love to partner up with these local residents to help get them listed on a lot of these rental companies. It's really upsetting and frustrating that there's organizations that are kind of preying on our community members and pushing them to potentially do something illegal and harmful to the community. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention and to remind them that there's still a moratorium on overnight accommodations. And then I just wanted to highlight the MVMC again. I've been meeting with some of their staff, and I know their caseloads are really maxed out right now. And they are a little short-staffed, but just wanted to commend them on all the fantastic work that they're doing, and if anybody in the community wants to support this organization, I'm sure they'd really appreciate it right now.
Thanks, Luke. Ronnie?
I didn't have much happening. We had our July 7th GWISA Groundwater and Sewer Service Agency meeting canceled. And we did have just our regular committee of staff and council and consultants on the visioning meet for the visioning process, Moab Tomorrow Together. So Carly mentioned the dates for those focus groups, and if anyone's interested, the way those 6 key focus group topics are broken out are tourism trajectory and economic diversification is 1, 2 is affordability and equity, 3 is leadership and decision making, 4 is environmental stewardship, 5 is housing and workforce, and 6 is community fabric and well-being. And then I just had a few follow-up comments and questions for you guys, given on what you said. So I, for some time, have gotten these postcards and letters from overnight rental companies. And in case it helps anybody else, I take a photograph or I deliver it to the city, to Mona. Carly, do you know her email address offhand? Because people should know, you can take a picture of it and you can send it to Mona and she'll follow up with those folks.
It's mpompoli@moabcity.org.
Okay, I couldn't remember if she had a simpler address. But yeah, because at the time she told me I was the only one sending them to her, so it's probably helpful if other people send them to her. And then I was just going to ask you, Carly, what's Sasha's last name, your new assistant?
It starts with an S. One sec. I want to make sure I get this right. I haven't had to spell it yet.
And then I was just going to ask Luke, do we know how many trail ambassadors there currently are?
I believe they only have 2 right now.
Okay, cool. Thanks. That was it for me.
Thanks, Ronnie. Jason?
I only had one board meeting last week, and it was the airport board yesterday. The airport board has hired a new manager, Tammy Howland. She's kind of been the interim director, and she was also the interim director when they hired the last one, so it's great that she got it. I think she'll do a really good job. The 2 new hangars that got approved to be built out there, and then the airport also ordered a building to put their snow removal equipment in that's coming this fall, which will be erected out there. Kind of the other end of things, employments are down with the major airlines that are out there, you know, with SkyWest and with the SkyWest service, as well as fuel cells and car rentals are down. So it's kind of interesting. So.
Wow.
And that's all I have.
Great. Thanks, Jason.
Scherzinger is her last name. That's why I didn't remember it. It's a tough one.
Sasha. Sasha's her name.
Sasha Scherzinger.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yesterday. She's really
Yeah. Yes, she is. I had an interview with Holly Lamont at KZMU regarding women in leadership roles in Moab. That was fascinating. It was a really good interview. And I also met with Ashley Kornblatt and Patty Trapp to talk about the timed entry and how that's going at Arches. We should be hearing from the park in one of our upcoming meetings here really soon to get some more information on that and the survey that they did. Met with Jen Sadoff. We meet on a monthly basis to just talk about healthcare issues. We also talked about feral cats. Carly was able to join me on that meeting. There is a huge issue with feral cats on the hospital property. And today, Jared and Paul Larson, who's the Park Service Chief Law Enforcement Ranger, met to they just had an active shooter training last week. You all heard about that, and the Park Service was able to participate that. And in that meeting, they were thrilled that they were invited. I think it's really important for all of our law enforcement agencies to work together. And so this was a way for Jared to meet Paul and for them to develop that ongoing law enforcement agency relationship. So that was a really good meeting. It was very positive. Ronnie and Mary Mcgann and I are going to meet next week to start our process discussions on UMTRA closure. This is going to be ongoing meetings that the three of us will have so that we can be prepared for when that closure starts to get to the point where we need to take some action, that we're ahead of the game. And then lastly, just so you all know, I'm going to be going to Salt Lake City tomorrow until the 25th of July. And so our mayor council meetings will be via Zoom. And Sasha will be in touch to schedule those meetings with you all. So that's all that I have. Anything else?
Oh, can I just mention, if anybody was listening and is interested in sending those mailings that they're getting from folks about overnight rentals in zones where they're not allowed, Mona Pompili is the code specialist, but she does have a simpler than spelling her last name and me spelling it out here, email address, and you can use, it's compliance@moabcity.org.
Thanks, Ronnie. Kaylin?
So two things on that. If a entity is consistent, has a pattern of consistently encouraging illegal behavior of a municipality, is that something that can be pursued?
Probably. I mean, are these like solicitations from out of town, from in town? What's the nature? We do like get
I would
people
say I've
for-
probably gotten 6 different ones in the last 2 or 3 years, and they're usually up from up on the Wasatch Front, but maybe not exclusively. I think I've probably gotten at least one from Colorado.
Yeah, like maybe a property
I just-
management company doing it.
I just got one
from
from an
his realtors.
individual like last week, and it was like a handwritten letter. I just threw it away, so I didn't really check to see where it came from. But
Yeah.
there's just some individual, it was like very personal. It was weird.
You can ask Mona, because I've sent her the ones I've gotten. She
Yeah.
probably has a
Our
record.
HOA board has gotten a few inquiries via email,
Or like asking you to maybe make some available.
or, yeah, something
Yeah. Oh,
like that.
interesting. Very interesting.
I
Yes.
send a not very nice letter back to them and tell them that we are not going to do it because it's illegal.
Yeah,
It's
please
illegal
do
in
send
our
them
HOA
to
and in the
Mona.
city.
Yeah, send them to Mona, please.
I will.
Yeah, great.
And the second thing was just that I was over in the Telluride area last weekend, and locals were commenting on how slow it seemed compared to last year. So,
Oh, so it's
so,
not, yeah.
so it might just be interesting to get some regional comparisons before we ascribe blame to anything that we're doing locally.
Yeah, that's a good point. What we're hearing is Zion and Bryce are up, but, you know, a lot of the other areas in the state are not.
Right.
So it would be good to get some more information, Carly. I don't know how we do that,
Well,
but
we could even reach out to the CAST network to ask them
Oh,
what their
that's a great
experience
idea.
is. Yeah,
Yep.
they might be tracking that. That's what I had in mind.
yep, good. All right, anything else? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Kaylin,
Second.
second by Tani. All in favor?
Aye.